Nobody knows who Andrew Yang is. He's not a politician, complete underdog, and surprisingly, actually, he's doing really well.
He's a serious person. He's smart and he cares.
The Tesla CEO tweeted his support for the venture capitalist on Saturday.
Gang, I'm gang.
Andrew Yang is polling above 2 senators and 1 governor.
He's actually higher in the polls. He's like this outlier. He's 44, the guy with the cap that said math.
You're raising issues that nobody else is talking about, and you're looking at it from a perspective that nobody else is really looking at.
How many people look at Bernie's supporters and think, there's some supporters I can go grab? If Bernie starts to melt, I do have this theory that anybody that's already left him for Warren's already left him for Warren. They're not going to Warren. They're actually, the 2 candidates I think that stand to benefit the most if Bernie starts to erode is Biden and Andrew Yang.
Andrew Yang.
And it's because of the Reddit world. The Bernie bros are more likely, I think, to go to Andrew Yang than any other person.
I think that's probably right.
Yeah.
And I think Yang certainly is the candidate that's been most misunderestimated.
Yes, we all have.
To use a classic term.
He's outraised.
The other contenders.
There's a lot of senators that he's outraised that we all thought would be in a higher tier.
And it just shows how much of an appetite there is on the left end of the political spectrum for someone who's completely out of the Washington space and who's talking in a different language. A lot of these senators that are running, you hear they speak in press releases.
They speak Washington.
There's certain phrases and verbs that they use that normal Americans don't use at all.
Like appropriate?
Like facilitate, that kind of thing. Yang never talks that way.
Can we be skeptical that Bernie Sanders is going to drop out anytime soon?
Oh, I don't believe you.
Because remember, in 2016, how furious were Hillary people that he kept hanging on and he kept poking at her, and all of his supporters were not easily just shifted over to her. It was a big problem, and I don't think that anybody should expect that, especially, I'd be very surprised if Andrew Yang outlasts Bernie Sanders.
I got to say this, Andrew Yang is now leading Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and Pete Buttigieg amongst black voters in the latest Quinnipiac poll, which is amazing. And it has something to do with the fact that, as we sort of talked about, he's come in with these sort of policy ideas that I think even some of the more liberal progressive candidates have missed. When he talks about automation and AI taking away working class jobs, that matters to working class black folks in South Carolina. When he talked about, he was ahead of the ball game when he talked about paying athletes. And that was something that resonated. So I don't think he's going to be the nominee, but he could benefit from Bernie people.
I do think, look, I'm done underestimating the guy. So now we're going to overestimate him, and then he'll fail to meet expectations. Sorry, Andrew.
He has good lines at debates.
He does have the good lines at debates. Thank you. Yeah.
Look, a lot of people are talking about impeachment. Nobody's talking about artificial intelligence and the actual national security threat that China's move in that direction poses. Nobody's talking about putting real cash in people's pockets. People talk about jobs. People got a bunch of jobs. They ain't got no money. You are somebody who's brought completely fresh thinking because you're so future focused, but you also have this grip on America's history as well. And you're starting to move. Why do you think you've been able to survive? You have now outlasted governors, senators, billionaires, people in the House of Representatives, people who are household names are not on that stage. You're on the stage. Why?
I think because we're having a conversation that Americans recognize as the truth of what's happened in their communities. We blasted away 40,000 manufacturing jobs in Iowa alone, and then Iowa went to Trump by 8 points. And this is playing out now on main streets around the country where Amazon is closing 30% of our stores and malls, and being a retail clerk is the most common job in these communities. I've had the same message the entire time, and it's broken through to the American people that these are the real problems and we have real solutions.
You got support from somebody who I didn't think you'd ever get the support of. I didn't think any politician would. Donald Glover, Childish Gambino, a hip hop legend. He comes out, he doesn't come out for Cory Booker, doesn't come out for Kamala Harris, doesn't come out for Obama's guy Biden, comes out for you, and more are coming. There's something that's beginning to shift around you. How did you get Childish Gambino on the Yang Gang?
You stole my question.
Go ahead, we know you got
No, this was a thrill for me because I'm a huge Donald Glover fan. I was like, no way.
That's crazy.
So someone on his team reached out to an agent that we knew in common, and then they said, hey, next time you're in LA, Donald wants to sit down with you. And we talked about our concerns and vision for the future. And we found that we were very, very aligned. And then from there, we talked about different ways to collaborate. And I am thrilled to be working with someone who sees the future as clearly as Donald does.
Yeah, you're starting to steal from different parts of the Democratic Party coalition, moderates, young blacks, and others. I just think that I'm proud to see that you're starting to prove with a smaller stage you can get your argument across.
Let's see where it goes. Andrew Yang, the best to
Thank
you and
you
your family
all
for the holidays.
All right, well, even though Andrew Yang, once again, of course, got the least speaking time of anyone on the stage, to include Tom Steyer, to include Amy Klobuchar, certainly, who actually got the second most speaking time on the stage. Andrew Yang had a phenomenal night last night and really reminded us all of why he is so special and why he has done so well in this race, outlasting governors, outlasting senators, outlasting members of Congress. And that is because he is really the truth teller of this race. We saw this in a few moments. First of all, out of the gates, of course, they asked about impeachment. I get it. It just happened. They have to. But I thought Bernie and Andrew Yang had the most honest, most controversial, but most direct answer on impeachment. Let's take a listen to what Andrew had to say.
The media networks didn't do us any favors by missing the reason why Donald Trump became our president in the first place. If you turn on cable network news today, you would think he's our president because of some combination of Russia, racism, Facebook, Hillary Clinton, and emails all mixed together. But Americans around the country know different. We blasted away 4 million manufacturing jobs that were primarily based in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri. I just left Iowa. We blasted 40,000 manufacturing jobs there. The more we act like Donald Trump is the cause of all of our problems, the more Americans lose trust that we can actually see what's going on in our communities and solve those problems. What we have to do is we have to stop being obsessed over impeachment, which unfortunately strikes many Americans like a ball game where you know what the score is going to be, and start actually digging in and solving the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place. We have to take every opportunity to present a new positive vision for the country, a new way forward to help beat him in 2020, because make no mistake, he'll be there at the ballot box for us to defeat.
It takes real courage to say that, to not buy into the fan fiction that would say any day Donald Trump is going to fall, any day he's going to resign, the walls are closing in, once the Senate trial happens, that's when people are going to realize, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It takes real courage to call out the many Democratic excuses for losing to Trump, to include Russia and Comey and Facebook, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It takes real courage. And let's be clear, Andrew Yang has said that he supports impeachment. He's not a fan of this president. He wants him out of office as much as anyone else. But by leveling with the Democratic base and by leveling with the American people, he does a great service not only to himself, but to the conversation in this primary that does need to get back as soon as possible to the core issues that people care about, whether it's healthcare, whether it's climate, whether it's wages, whether it's just living lives of dignity with meaning. You know, also going into last night, I said here that Andrew Yang needed to show also that he's got some spunk, that not only is he funny, not only is he smart, not only does he have good ideas, but he's got to show that he's a little bit of a fighter. And he got in there on the action of exposing Mayor Pete and had probably the best line mocking Mayor Pete of the night. Let's take a listen.
I just want to return to this conversation because I think it's core. Our country is deeply misogynist, and most all of us know that. Money and men are tied together. That's where I thought Elizabeth was taking the conversation. The fact is, strong societies would elect more female leaders. Strong men treat women well for the same reasons. I'm on the record saying that you need both strong men and female leaders in government, because the fact is, if you get too many men alone and leave us alone for a while, we kind of become morons. So it's related to our campaign finance rules, because right now the fact is we operate in a fundamentally anti-woman marketplace, and that includes the marketplace for politicians. If we were to put 100 democracy dollars into the hands of every American voter, instead of 5% contributing, you'd see that rate skyrocket to 50 or 60%, and you'd have many, many more women who would run for office because they don't have to go shake the money tree in the wine cave.
I am sure going into last night, the last person that Mayor Pete thought he was going to be relentlessly mocked and destroyed by was Andrew Yang, but yet he was there with the cutting and memorable remark about shaking the money tree in the wine cave. Absolutely love that. And look, it's not just because we have our critiques of Mayor Pete here, but he needs to show that he's a fighter. And I think in that moment you saw the way that Andrew Yang would prosecute the case and potentially go after a Donald Trump. But the final moment that I wanted to share that I thought was so important, that is so central to Andrew Yang's campaign, is how he connected his care for the special needs community, having his own son on the autism spectrum, with the core message of his campaign about the fundamental dignity and worth of every single human being. Let's take a look at that.
Can you outline specific steps that the government should take to help integrate these young people into the workforce and into their local communities? I would love it. I have a son with special needs. And to me, special needs is the new normal in this country. How many of you all have a family member or a friend or a neighbor with special needs or autism? If you look around, most hands went up. The fact is, right now, we have to do more for Kyle. Special needs children are going to become special needs adults in many cases. And here's the challenge. We go to employers and say, hey, this special needs person can be a contributor in your workplace, which may be correct, but that's not the point. We have to stop confusing economic value and human value. We have to be able to say to our kids and Kyle that you have intrinsic value because you're an American and you're a human being.
We have to stop confusing economic value for human value. That is the central message of his campaign. And that, in a nutshell, is why he has outlasted so many people. It's really that simple. It's not necessarily about the freedom dividend. It's not necessarily about the fact that he's an outsider. It's that he puts at the center of his campaign the idea that every human being is worthy. Sagar, I thought he really had the performance that he needed to have last night, not just for the Yang Gang, who are always going to love him, but to broaden his appeal and show the American people why he is special and unique in this race.
His closing statement, he bookended it with two phenomenal statements. He had that opening answer on impeachment, knocked it out of the park. I mean, actually, it's just a sample poll of, fellow conservatives on Twitter.
Yeah.
He won that. I mean, it was funny. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, Andrew Yang actually talking about the issues that we care about. I mean, in terms of crossover support, we covered it here.
Right.
There is no candidate that has that. The final answer, the closing statement, I thought it was phenomenal, which was saying, I know what you're thinking, America. What am I doing up here? And then really showing, why am I up here? I mean, all of those answers, that answer on human dignity, on economic value and human value, those answers on money, and the opening answer on impeachment, hands down, is why Andrew Yang was on the stage. I think he guaranteed himself a place up there on the next stage. He really has, I think, vaulted himself up by 1 or 2%. I bet you he raised quite a bit of money.
This is all going to play out, and what impact is it going to have on the 2020 election?
My new favorite political pundit is Doc Brown from Back to the Future. There's a part where I think it's at the end of the first Back to the Future, he picks them up and they've got to go into the future. And they're like, oh, there's not enough road. And he says, roads, where we're going, there are no roads. That's the way I feel about where we're headed.
Really?
I'll say this. I think if I could make one bet right now, the only bet I'd be comfortable saying in public is I think somebody not named Warren, Sanders, or Biden will finish in the top 3 in Iowa, and that person will be the sort of, that person could be the candidate X that everybody's been wondering, who would be the alternative to Biden if Biden collapsed? Well, the best likely, and here's what I would say, then I would, if somebody finishes 3rd, not named Warren, Biden, or Sanders, I think that person becomes a big deal.
And you don't want to fill in the blank.
Well, no, I think on paper you would say there's 2 candidates best positioned to be that person right now. Pete Buttigieg, financially, and I think he plays well in Iowa. He's one of the, people forget, Iowa Democrats are more religious than average Democrats these days. Democrats as a whole are a little more secular, obviously, than the country as a whole. But in Iowa, many Democrats are still weekly churchgoers. So is Pete. And Pete, I think the person that could be the wild card here, that if Bernie starts to recede, is Andrew Yang.
Fascinating comment from a Team Rising member, Chris Prudhomme. Here's what he had to say about 2020 candidate Andrew Yang. I think he is very engaging. I think he's sincere and genuine. And it kind of reminds me of when you look at, well, in certain ways, when you look at President Trump in 2016, being the outsider, being the non-political person. I think there's a certain amount of authenticity that Andrew Yang has, and that resonates with people.
You know, that panel,
Totally right.
That panel got people love. They watched a lot of that panel because it talked about this poll that Andrew Yang had come out where he's at 8%.
Beating Pete Buttigieg.
Beating Pete. And we asked the question, is this a turning point for his campaign? I really actually think it is. He's on the debate stage. He looks set to make the even heightened criteria. And the media is finally taking him and treating him a little bit more seriously.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about divisive issues here. I mean, Chris was a Republican panelist, and every single time we talk about Yang, every single time, everybody here is like, yeah, I appreciate what he has to say. There isn't, I mean, there's criticism of UBI, there's criticism, but on a policy, but he really, more than any other candidate, does not bring the derision of Washington to this table, and that is so refreshing. I mean, I don't know, it's so unique to his candidacy, and it's something that has been missing from our politics for, I mean, it hasn't existed in my lifetime.
Well, in my interview with Andrew, he pointed out that there are two candidates who have more than 10% of Trump supporters who are backing them. It's Andrew and Bernie Sanders. And I think it's, you know, it's interesting what that says about their crossover support because they have very different styles. They have very different sort of platforms and things that they focus on. Although I would say both of them are very laser focused on inequality and what that's doing to America. But they both have an authenticity and they both are willing to be critical of the Democratic Party, and I think that's a very strong place to stand.
That's the biggest stand.
He's gone viral in a whole range of different communities.
He's not saying the same kind of stuff that all the other candidates are saying. And when he talks, it lands, in part because he's saying things that are unique.
I think America is ready for a different kind of president who's more about substance than form. I'm not a politician. I'm not someone who's been rattling around Washington for years or decades. Most Americans don't think that career politicians are going to solve our problems. And I think those problems are accelerating and getting more and more serious. I'm also a parent. And when you have kids, you also have a different perspective where you think, okay, how am I going to leave the country or the world in a condition that I'd be proud to leave to my kids? And right now, I'm not excited about the world we're leaving to our kids. I mean, our life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years due to a surge in drug overdoses and suicides. 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 57% say they can't afford an unexpected $500 bill. And so people are looking around and saying, wait a minute, if GDP's at a record high, why do things feel so lousy? How can you say an economy is healthy when our people are dying? If you say, oh, someone else will take care of this, that almost never works. So I decided I could make a contribution.
So I came to Washington, D.C., and I said, what are we going to do? This official said to me, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one in this town is going to do anything about the problems that you described because this town is a town of followers, not leaders. And the only way for us to do something about it is if you bring a wave crashing down on our heads. I looked at that and I thought, these words, challenge accepted.
We talk about it like Donald Trump is the cause of all of our problems. He is not. He is a symptom. He is a manifestation. We are going through the greatest economic transformation in our country's history.
I'm the son of immigrants myself, and if you go to a factory here in Michigan, you will not find wall-to-wall immigrants. You will find wall-to-wall robots and machines. Immigrants are being scapegoated for issues they have nothing to do with in our economy.
And what we did to the manufacturing jobs, we will now do to the retail jobs, the call center jobs, the fast food jobs, the truck driving jobs, and on through the economy.
Raise your hand in the crowd if you've seen stores closing where you live. It is not just you. Amazon is closing 30% of America's stores and malls and paying zero in taxes.
In a country that is tearing itself apart with people turning on each other, this is the mindset of scarcity that is sweeping our country. We have to make big choices right now as a country. And we have to start evolving and advancing in terms of the way we see our economy and our role within it. What we have to do is we have to focus on fixing the system that is distorting and dehumanizing.
I'm running for president because I'm an American and I'm a parent, and I can see the country we will leave to our children, and it is not something that I'm willing to accept.
The only thing I worry about is that some total unknown that nobody ever heard of
comes along.
And so he would be someone to watch because there's still time for an outlier to kind of rise up.
And the guy just has solution after solution after solution.
There is something compelling about a guy that just seems to have played by the rules and done everything right and believes in math and believes in science.
You make sense to me, and you can fix stuff that's happening in the towns that I see every day. I'm going to listen to what you have to say. Pay attention to this kid's plan.
I have done the math. It's not left. It's not right. It's forward. And that is how we're going to beat Donald Trump in 2020. So the third big thing is, how many of you all woke up this morning? Oh, what do we got? Eagles. It's a sign. Eagle. Gang gang 2020. Gang gang 2020. Gang gang 2020. Gang gang. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah, yeah. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah, yeah. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang 2020. Yang gang. Yeah, yeah.